There's a kind of music that lives in a very specific emotional space. Unrequited love, distance, regret, the feeling of being left behind. It speaks from the perspective of the person who wasn't chosen, the one still holding on to the words they never said. Its power comes from emotional honesty and restraint, songs that feel lived in, personal, and uncomfortably real. Not glamorous, no bravado, just painfully relatable and painfully human. Back Number isn't a band built on image or spectacle. They're built on moments most people try to forget.
怖いけどステージにも上がります。怖いけど歌を歌います。できることは少ないけど、でもそれを待ってくれたり待っててくれたり、俺以上に俺を買ってくれてる人がいるから、それだけの理由です。水平線が光る朝にあなたの希望が崩れ、会いたいと思うかいつか会えないと言いたい、この会いたいんだ今すぐその角から飛び出し、今ま浮かれてゆくあなたを好きなままで消えてゆく。
The name Back Number refers to an old issue, most typically of a magazine, something already replaced, something from the past. Shimizu chose the name after a painful breakup when his ex-girlfriend at the time left him for another musician. He realized he had become someone's past. He felt like a back number in her life, outdated and left behind. Because of this, he wanted to start a band cooler than the musician she went for, hoping that maybe one day she would notice him again. Whether that hope was realistic or not doesn't really matter. What matters is that the band was born from Heartbreak. And from that moment on, Back Number became a project built on unreturned feelings, emotional distance, and regret, themes that still define their music today. And now that we've looked at the origins of the band, let's have a look at the emotional core behind the band. And every part of Back Number begins with one person, Shimizu Iyori. Before music, Iyori lived an ordinary life in Gunma. He wasn't raised in Tokyo's music scene, didn't come from an elite artistic background, and never tried to present himself as a larger-than-life rock star. And that ordinariness became his greatest strength. Rather than writing from confidence or bravado, Iyori writes from vulnerability. His lyrics lean into insecurity, hesitation, and the small emotional details most people keep hidden. Iyori's lyrics almost always come from the losing side of love. They avoid dramatic exaggeration, they rarely sound heroic, and instead, they feel like private thoughts turned into songs. Many of them feel like things you wanted to say but never did, or I wish you happiness, even if I can't be a part of it. And that honesty is why listeners describe Back Number as painfully relatable. Not poetic in a distant way, but personal, almost in an uncomfortable way. And with Iyori done, let's look at their bassist Kojima Kazuya. Kazuya wasn't the original bassist. He joined the band during its fragile early years when the lineup was still changing and the future was uncertain. Unlike Iyori, Kazuya isn't outwardly expressive. He doesn't seek the spotlight, but his role is essential. His bass provides the grounded stability that allows Iyori to fully express his emotions without the music ever falling apart. And the relationship between him and Iyori is key, as they are childhood friends they have built on years of trust, and this bond created a safe space where Back Number's emotional honesty could truly develop. And with that done, let's take a look at the last member, Kurihara Hisashi. In 2006, Hisashi joined as the drummer and the band finally became whole. This was a major turning point for the group. Although the original guitarist left, their sound stabilized and Back Number began to feel like a real, complete band. Hisashi's drumming style matches the group perfectly, always serving the emotions of the songs. At times, his playing even rises above other instruments, giving the sense that he is pouring his own feelings into every beat. In a band where emotion matters more than flash, Hisashi's drumming breathes life into their music, echoing the pulse of a broken heart. And here is a small but interesting twist. Remember how Iyori's ex left him for another musician? Well, Hisashi was actually the drummer of that very band, and after it disbanded, Iyori poached him to Back Number. And together these three form the core trio behind Back Number, and to me it's absolutely insane to think about how closely related these people are. And with that done, let's take a look at the band's history. Like their music, Back Number had really humble beginnings with their first performance coming in 2004. And they would continue on playing for small live houses until they saw their first signs of success coming in 2007 when the band performed a one-man live show. This is when they started gaining recognition locally in the Gunma prefecture. Riding this momentum, they released their first mini-album in 2009, Nogashita Sakana. and they started spreading their music nationally. They released their first full album in 2010, Ato no Matsuri, and in 2011 they signed to a major label. But they did not stop here because this is where their fame skyrocketed. Songs like Take no Hanako-san, Happy End, Christmas Song turned them into national stars. Christmas Song in particular became a cultural classic, a track tied to winter, relationships, and personal memories for millions of people. And even to this day, more than 10 years after its release, Christmas Song remains one of the most used tracks during Christmas, with it being the go-to backing track for the Roppongi Hills Christmas illumination. This era marked the most dominant era for Back Number, and at this point, they weren't just a band, they were part of people's lives. And this brings us to modern day Back Number, with their performance at Tokyo Dome marking their arrival at the top. But even with success, they never abandoned their core, continuing to make the same music that made them successful in the first place. Now that we've learned everything about the band itself, let's take a look at what their music actually sounds like. And Back Number's music classifies as pop rock with the characteristics of warm, clean guitar tones and simple but emotional melodies. The songs rarely explode with aggression, instead they build slowly, like emotions being held back until they can no longer be contained. And even Iyori's technique reflects this style, because in singing, voices are generally categorized into two types, your chest voice and your head voice. Kind of think of it as a slider where you can change how much of each you want to output depending on how you want to sound. When you're using your head voice, the amount of power you can produce is naturally more limited compared to using your chest voice, and Iyori often chooses to sing in his head voice even when he technically doesn't need to. Not because he can't hit the notes, but because that softer tone creates a sense of vulnerability and powerlessness. It makes the emotions feel closer, more human. Combined with the lyrics, Back Number's songs begin to feel less like performances and more like confessions, messages spoken straight from the heart, often filled with regret, frustration, and jealousy. Rather than focusing on the joys of falling in love, Back Number's music focuses on the opposite, the pain of loving someone, and the consequences of losing them. And that resonates with so many people, because loving someone is never easy, and in love, there's always someone left behind. The songs remind us that music doesn't need to be complicated to feel special, and sometimes, the simplest melodies and words are often the ones that touch us the most. Back Number's music doesn't try to fix the pain, it simply acknowledges it. Their songs don't give advice, they don't promise happy endings, they just sit with you in the feeling. That's why so many listeners say their music feels uncomfortably accurate. Because Back Number doesn't tell you it'll be okay, they sit next to you while it isn't. From tiny live houses to sold-out domes, their rise has been slow and earned. They never relied on trends, never chased a new image. They simply kept writing honest songs about ordinary human emotions. And because of that, Back Number became the darlings of Japan. Their songs now a legacy, a tradition, a cultural icon that continues to touch people's lives. In a world that celebrates the joys and happiness of love, they chose to speak the quiet truth, to say the words most of us swallow, to sing the thoughts we keep to ourselves. And from those hidden feelings, Back Number built a voice for the brokenhearted, a voice that has touched the hearts of millions, not to mend our broken hearts, but to remind us that even in the loneliest, most fragile moments, they'll always be there, quietly holding our hearts through the pain.